Hello, everybody. Today, I wanted to talk to you about why you need to know about this sort of old idea that you see on the internet from time to time, but it actually comes from a pretty cool place. This idea I want to talk to you is called Chesterton's fence. Right? G.K. Chesterton was an English writer from, about 100 years ago, and he wrote a bunch of great stuff. Novelist, thinker, funny guy. Anyway, a little bit of a fanboy over here, I guess, with Chesterton. But I wanted to talk about this idea that is become popularly known as Chesterton's fence, and the gist of it goes something along the lines of, you and a buddy are walking through the woods and you come across a fence, and your immediate reaction is like, why is this fence here? It's in the way, so let's get rid of the fence. Right? And so the first person says, let's get rid of it. The second person is like, well, maybe we should, well, why was it here? Right. And it is in that question that, well, why is it here? That I think is an invitation into something that's really vitally important for us to consider. Right. So we might distill it down into something along the lines of, do not remove a fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. Right. Simple. Now, I love this idea because it is a kind of mental model that you can use in order to understand, your personality. It's good so that you can understand, how you approach novel situations or the unknown. And um, by simply asking the question, sort of invites you into a space of potential wisdom. Right? We, in our time and space, tend to reward and look up to those people who sort of act boldly and with conviction, and take care of business, and let's declutter things. Let's get to some kind of place of purity so that we can kind of clean things up and act boldly. I'm sort of repeating myself there, but you get the kind of idea. Right. And it tends to focus upon the new is good and the old is old fashioned and probably not necessary. Right. It's old stuff. Let's get out of this. And so, but we can simply ask that question, what problem did this thing? And of course, it doesn't have to be a fence. It could be all kinds of different things. Right? It could be a social structure. It can be a religious idea. It can be a political idea. It can be a cultural idea. It can be music and art and storytelling. It can be any number of these different things. You can see this in athletics. You can see this in performance. Anything along those lines, you can sort of ask the question, well, why was this thing here? And I think you can then ask the question is, well, what problem did it solve? Right? You know, um, and then significantly, and this is something that I do think is worthy of your time here, is not only what problem did it solve, but what problems did it create in the solving of a problem. Right? What it forces you to do, right, by using this model of Chesterton's fence, what it forces you to do is it makes you think through a problem. And it might even be through a problem that you yourself are totally ignorant of, or totally unaware of, or might even just not be a problem for you. But if you ask that question in the spirit of humility and generosity, you might find that, well, maybe there was a reason we did this thing, uh, you know, 50 years ago or 20 years ago, or heck, last year. Maybe we did this thing because there was a recognition that we needed a problem to be solved, and this was offered as a solution. Right? So it forces you not to think above a problem or around a problem or beyond a problem, but rather to think through a problem. And so that if we can see the fence here, this mechanism, this technology, if we can see it as having once done a task, then we can kind of ask this a really important question, right? And the inherited models that we have can present themselves to us as some kind of outmoded and no longer necessary thing. But the mind can also play an interesting trick here. And you might be inclined to say, not only does it not solve a problem now, but it's not even a problem. And besides, it didn't solve it in the first place. And I think it is important. I've lived long enough at this point to recognize that, well, there's probably something that I'm missing. And even that idea that maybe there's something that I'm missing, maybe there's something that I'm not entirely seeing, connects to the idea that I talked about in another video about confounds, right? Novel insertions of new technologies, new ways of being that disrupt what we just considered the normal course of things. And so we can think about all the technologies that we use and live through in our current time and space, and you can ask the question, well, what problem is this thing solving? So, take something as simple as the cell phone, right? Well, it's funny. It's not really a cell phone, is it? It's a smartphone, and not all that smart, but it does a bunch of different things. In fact, it's replaced a bunch of different things. And so we can say, well, what problem did it initially solve? Well, going all the way back, of course, it solved the problem of not being tethered to a landline, right? So that I could take my phone with me in the car or out and about, and I could be reached at all times, right? But naturally, the phone, it's not even really just a phone. As we know, it's your device, it's your gadget. It does many, many more things. And so, in fact, I'm old enough to remember when we actually worried about how many minutes we had left on our cell phone plan, because if we went beyond the minutes, then we got supercharged for the use of the phone. And now I bet I spend no more than an hour total a month on the phone. I spend a lot more than that, of course, on my apps. I love my Twitter, and I love all of those sorts of things. That it really has become an app machine more than that. So anyway, you can kind of ask that question: well, what problem did it solve? Well, it's a communication problem, and so now we use it to solve a bunch of other problems that may or may not be being solved by this device, right? So, but notice what we've done here is by inviting you to think about what it originally solved, then we can say, is there wisdom to be found in letting it go? Is there wisdom to be found in doubling down? These are kind of things that I think it's important to ask. But what I believe it does is that it forces you to be a little bit more circumspect about how you approach any problem you might have. Well, what do I mean by circumspect? Well, if you recall, or maybe you don't, but in that word, for me, that word is forever associated with Odysseus and Penelope in Homer's Odyssey. And both of the main characters are described as being circumspect. And circumspect, if you sort of just look at the word, circum is sort of circle around, spect is to look. So to sort of to look around a thing, to look around a person, to look around a problem, right? So to be circumspect is to consider things from a number of different angles. In the Odyssey, this is the marker of Odysseus's greatness. Interestingly enough, too, is that it is also a marker of his wife's greatness, is that both of them have this circumspect quality. And so you can imagine Odysseus or Penelope walking through the woods, and they see this fence, and it doesn't have any immediate problem solving capacity, but they take a look at it, and you can imagine, say, Penelope be like, well, I know that people want to get rid of this thing, but maybe we should not get rid of this thing because maybe it was demarcating something that is important. Right? Maybe that if we took away the fence, it would not only no longer solve this original problem, but it might in fact create more problems. Right? So this circumspection that the Chesterton's fence invites us into is, I think, the very kind of the sort of the structure of the engine, the capacity for wisdom, like to sort of to be deeply considered to sort of think through these implications. Now, the last little bit I want to get into here with Chesterton's fence, because I think we've talked about it in terms of it affording wisdom, is that sometimes it is not an invitation to do nothing. Because in a proper assessment, you could come across the fence. You could sincerely ask the question of, what did this fence do? And in the spirit of maturity, and you sort of have exhausted all the different options, you can determine that, well, yeah, actually, we need to take down the fence. And I think that's a crucial part of the Chesterton's fence idea that gets neglected. It tends to be a thing like, beware, don't do these things because it could create more problems. But it's not. I don't think it is an invitation into inaction. I think it's actually an invitation into prudent action, right? To sort of really think through something. And at the end, you might have the idea that, you know what? After careful consideration, I think it is time to take this fence down. So sometimes Chesterton's fence will compel you to not destroy the thing, and that's oftentimes very good. But sometimes they might say, you know what? Yeah, it's time. This thing has outlived its purpose. It is gumming up the works, and so if we can take this out, something good will happen. But always remember that solutions. It's always tempting to think of solutions, but I think it's probably better to think in terms of trade-offs. Right? I might have a smooth lawn with no fence at the end of it, but it might no longer keep things out that I wanted to keep out, or it might no longer, the fence being gone, no longer keep things in that I wanted contained. So anyway, Chesterton's fence, much more to talk about, but I think it's a great idea. If you like these kind of things, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. Please share them. We'll do these little sort of 10 minutes, 10 good minutes after class. Take care. Bye.